Who are the top 3 players on the Rams, and who will the Rams wide receiver 1 be this year? Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua? That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor and join the party. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button, and let us know. Do you think that Cooper Kupp will have a bounce-back year, and does he still have Pro Bowl years in front of him? My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade. Bleacher Report, Dodgers Nation, SI, 24/7 Sports. Now the Rams for Locked On, and as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre, half, and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He's entering his 9th season covering your Los Angeles Rams. The People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's show, the Rams are the Rams the least athletic team in the NFL? Also, will Cooper Kupp finish his career on the Rams? What does the future hold for Cooper Kupp, and can he have a bounce-back season? Is he WR1? Talking a lot of Cooper Kupp today. And who are the top 3 players on the Rams? That's coming up next. But first, this episode of Locked On Rams is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, Travis, we're going to get right into it. Pro Football Focus's Trevor Sikkema, he ranked the top 3 players for every single team in the NFL. And for the Rams, it feels like it was pretty obvious, especially with Aaron Donald retiring. Yeah, Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp. I think some players are under consideration. You could have thrown out Kyren Williams. You could have thrown out Kobe Turner. But it looks like the Rams' big 3 is pretty obvious. But it just makes you wonder, how close was one of those other guys to replacing Cooper Kupp in that big 3?
Yeah, I think that's it, right, Doug? That the first 2, I think, are absolute no-brainers. I think number 1 is number 1 by, a lap and a half, that Matthew Stafford is clearly the best player on this team and the most important player, the most irreplaceable player, however you want to describe it. He's the guy, and he's probably 1, 2, and 3, if we're being honest, because those other guys might be able to hang around and play. But if Matthew Stafford isn't there, I don't know what difference it makes. I agree that Puka Nacua is the second best because of what he did last year, because about his health and coming in and being a younger player, and certainly the upside that comes along with a guy that's just starting his career the way that Nacua is. I'm with you. Where it gets interesting is in number 3. I think it's probably Kupp, but you wouldn't have to twist my arm very hard to talk me into Kyren Williams. You really wouldn't have to twist my arm very hard to talk me in to Kobe Turner, the 2 guys that you mentioned. You and I really didn't even talk about that before we got started. Those are the 2 next best players in my estimation. And I think if we were having this conversation maybe in week 6 or 7 of the season, we might come up with a very different answer, and Cooper Kupp might not be in that 3rd spot.
Yeah, absolutely. It really comes down to this. Are you basing off last year? If you're basing off last year, it's easily one of those 2 names you mentioned, Kyren or Kobe Turner. If you're basing it on the back of his baseball card and what he did a couple of seasons ago and what his ceiling has proven to be, then you go with Cooper Kupp. I hate when you throw out with players if he's healthy. Right. But unfortunately, that's where we're at with Cooper Kupp. Yes, he's productive when he's healthy, but still, even then, the production hasn't been as good as it's been in 2021, right? Or even before that. But 2022, he did have himself a really good year until he was getting injured. We're going to talk about that in the second segment. But I think with Cooper Kupp, it comes down to this. Is he going to be included in that list of receivers that when they got north of 30, they started to produce? Because we talked about it heading into last season, that if you were north of 30, you were going to be on the decline. Your numbers were going to go down. You're going to really start to really come down to earth as a player. But what we saw in 2023 around the NFL was receivers 30 and up started to produce once again. You had Mike Evans, Keenan Allen. They both had over 1,200 yards. Stephon Diggs, he's 30. Devontae Adams, 31. DeAndre Hopkins, 31. Thielen, 33. They all had over 1,000 yards. So point is, you can still put up really big time numbers and have a big impact north of 30. That's what we learned last year. And the question is, can Cooper Kupp stay healthy, and can he get back to being one of those receivers?
Like you said at the beginning, whenever the qualification, if healthy, is thrown in there, that's always a huge red flag, because what does that mean? It means you're not healthy. It means that you haven't been healthy for quite some time. And unfortunately, that's been true with Kupp over the last couple of seasons. I think that he will be one of those guys, D-Mac, in that group. I think that can be very productive post 30 because of the way he plays. This is not somebody that was predicated on, elite speed. This was not somebody that was predicated on just being more athletic. Now, I'm not doing the thing where he's just because, he's this player or that player that he's not athletic. The fact of the matter is he's incredibly smart. He runs really good routes. He's big. He's physical. He's strong. He's tough. That's what makes him the sort of player that he is. And, oh, by the way, he can go get it a little bit too. But if he's not right physically, if he can't stand up to the pounding that has made him over the first part of his career, then it's going to be really tough, because I think he's one of these guys that can continue to play well into his early and mid 30s if he's healthy. And so far in his late 20s and early part of his 30s, he really hasn't been. And, until we see it, it's a mystery. Until you see it, it's a big question mark. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I really think that he's one of those guys that is going to determine the Rams' success this season, based nothing on whether or not he can play, but whether or not he's healthy. That if he's good, I think everything else kind of comes down and kind of falls into place. If he's not, you're going to be asking a lot from some other guys on your roster.
And they needed Cooper Kupp to have the year he had in 2021, not just in the regular season, but what he did in the postseason. What he did in the regular season, it was historic, of course, 1,947 yards, 16 tutties, offensive player of the year, first team All-Pro, finished third in the MVP. But he played 17 games that season. In the next 2 years, he played 21 games combined in those seasons. And you'll look at the statistics there. I mean, in 21 games, 134 catches for 1,549 yards and 11 touchdowns in 21 games versus what he did in that 2021 season. So you're basically seeing less production in 2 years than we saw in that 1 year. And that kind of gives you an idea of, one, how ridiculous that 2021 season was, and two, just how much the injuries have diminished his production. And the other big takeaway here is this, Travis. I mean, you mean to tell me Los Angeles Rams, a team that goes out there, they trade for big veterans, right? The F them picks era is still a possibility if there was a guy that they wanted to get. They have money to go get big guys, but your second best player was your fourth pick in the 5th round already in his second year. I mean, that's pretty impressive, but also kind of eye-popping when you consider what this franchise is about and their ability to attain big-time superstars.
It is. I want to go back to something you were talking about too, about how the season he had in 2021, the season where they won the Super Bowl, where he's a Triple Crown winner, where he's a Super Bowl MVP, and he was all of those things that we're talking about. What he was more than anything, and really has not been since then, was a threat. That you needed to know where he was. You needed to know what might happen next. That this was a guy that when the Rams would break the huddle, it's, all right, there's Kupp, we're going to go from there. I don't think that's been true the last couple of years. I think that they need to get back to him, maybe not being that Triple Crown guy, but is he a threat? Is he somebody that is going to get open on 3rd and 7 every time? Is he somebody that can pop a big play if you try to cover him in a certain way and leave the top uncovered? I think that's what you need to think about when even if it's not necessarily 17 games, even if it's not, what we were talking about it was before you and I started doing the show together. You could just pencil him in for 10 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown almost every single week. It doesn't need to be that, but it needs to be 5 or 6 catches, and 3 or 4 of those 5 or 6 need to have been big plays for first down. Is he a threat? Is he the guy that you keep your eye on every single time, or is he just out there running routes trying to draw attention away from Puka Nacua?
Absolutely. Those are the real big questions, right? How productive can he be on a per snap basis, on a per game basis? Is he the wide receiver 1 if he's fully healthy? What does his future look like for the Rams? That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
All right. The NBA Finals are just about here. We got one team that's in. We're waiting on the other. We know what it's going to be. How cool would it be to go to an NBA Finals game? How cool would it be to go to an NHL playoff game and Stanley Cup final game? You can do all of these things with the Game Time app because you can get your tickets, even last-minute tickets, with that Game Time app. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest prices guaranteed. So Game Time is taking the guesswork out of buying all of your NBA, NHL, pretty much anything that you can think of in your area, right? Major League Baseball tickets. Doug and I love Major League Baseball. You can find baseball tickets, concerts, comedy, whatever you want in your area, all with that Game Time app, right? And you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. And of course, that last minute, I'm a little bit of a procrastinator sometimes. Nobody's going to find you a better last minute deal than Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying your NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and enter the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a super special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching and listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams, helping us get to 13,000 subscribers over on YouTube. So thank you for that. And you can join the Everyday Listeners Club too. Right now, we're running a special OTAs promotion where membership is 100% free. You just have to watch, listen to every single episode, and you won't miss one thing about your Los Angeles Rams. All right, Travis, want to pick right up on what you were talking about with Cooper Kupp and the production. And the truth of the matter is that any way you slice it, you can say the production level has gone down. In 2021, just kind of using that almost as an unfair measuring stick for how good he can be when he's fully healthy, that catch percentage is at 76%. Last season alone, that dropped to 62%. You look at his yards per target that season, 10.2 yards. His yards per catch was 13.4. And then you look at last season, it was 8 and 11.6. So those are the last two seasons combined. So no matter how you try to slice it, the yards per target, the yards per catch, the yards per game, they've all gone down. I mean, 2021 was at 114.5 and 8.5 catches. And then in the last two seasons, 73.8 yards per game and 6.4 catches per game. So basically what I'm trying to say is if you look at the last 2 years, you combine those, he's just a above average receiver, but he's not a wide receiver one.
Yeah, it's funny. You know, you and I look at these things. We get to the same place. We take different roads to get there, right? Like you're very analytically driven and you're talking about all these numbers and you're right. And this is not the guy that he was in 2021. I watch it and go, is the other team scared of that guy? Am I concerned that they're going to, or when I watch the Rams break the huddle, do I think the ball is going to him or do I think the ball is going somewhere else? For a long time, the ball felt like it's going somewhere else, that he isn't that guy that, okay, we got to have it here. That turned into Puka. That turned into Kyren. Not that he didn't have a moment here or there, but it wasn't one of those, I sit next to Kirk Morrison in the press box at SoFi Stadium, and he'll always tell me third down, it's third and Kupp, here it comes. And it was inevitable that here it comes was just, all right, they need 7 yards. They're going to get 8.5. And it was always to Cooper Kupp. And it was always him popping up and first down. And here we go again. And all right, let's start this thing going over again. It hasn't been that for a few years. He'll get one, but it's more of they went to Kupp this time, as opposed to, of course, they went to Kupp this time. And I think that's what we're talking about. Can he get back to that point of being the guy that when you got to have it, he's the guy that it goes to? When you got to have it the way you needed it in the Super Bowl, they ran 49 plays in a row for Cooper Kupp, and Cincinnati had no answer for him. Everybody in the building knew that's where the ball was going, and they still couldn't stop him. I think that maybe getting back to that level is unrealistic, but can you get back to 85, 90% of that level? Is that realistic? That's the question that the Rams need to ask themselves, because here's the other thing. You need Kupp to come up a little bit because Puka inevitably is going to come down. And that's not a criticism of Puka at all. It's just how good of a year he had last year. So if you want that production in that wide receiver room the way it was a year ago, and Nacua is going to come down a little bit, well, somebody else needs to come up, and that somebody has to be Kupp.
Yeah, I like that you brought that up, Travis, because that really is my fear. Is this a little unfair to Puka Nacua saying you're going to carry this torch? You are going to be a WR1, right? I mean, it's a little different when you're a WR1 that teams are scheming to stop versus you're surprising guys for the first part of the season, and then you become a little bit of a name, and then you become a household name in the playoffs. But is he that true wide receiver one? We're going to find out this season, because right now he's going to get those opportunities. And kind of getting back to the numbers and that kind of stuff, yeah, you can always cherry pick. I mean, pretty much people always use numbers to form their narrative. And I could sit here and say, oh, if you look at the 2022 season before he got injured, he was on pace for 144 catches, over 1,600 yards and 12 touchdowns, which would have been his second season. So which is it? Is it just blame this all on the injuries? Is this blame this all on just a player that is going to have some decline when you are on the wrong side of 30? I think it's a combination of both.
I do too. And I think that the 2022 season is almost one you just kind of wash your hands of and say, let's just throw that away and pretend it never happened. The 2021 season, the Super Bowl season, was the best of his career and probably always will be. I would assume that that's a fact. The year after that was such a bust across the board. We all know the offensive line. You know, the everydayers will certainly remember how often we talked about that O-line. They had 14 different guys, and they didn't have the same 5 guys up front for the first 15 weeks of the season. It was a you-know-what show. Last year, I think, is a better indicator of what the future may look like for Cooper Kupp. Not necessarily 2022, but 2023, where he missed the start of the season. And even when he was in the lineup, there was a little bit of a, is he healthy or not kind of vibe around it. He'd still make a play here and there, but you never felt like he was really fully himself. Not even necessarily statistically, but just eye test. Is he getting open? Is he impacting games the way that he used to? I think that last year is probably a much better indicator of what this year may look like than a couple of years ago. Hopefully he's healthier. He's more impactful than he was last year, but I think that last year's probably a much better indicator of what the future may look like than any other season we've seen so far.
And my hope is that we see him stay healthy, and because of the fact that he's not WR1, that he can really play his role in a more impactful way. But the big question here, all this is to say, this is a guy that he has a cap hit of $29.8 million this season. He missed 13 games in the last 2 years. And then following this season, you're looking at a guy that's going to be paid $30 million, right? I mean, at what point does the organization say, look, we love you, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford loves you, but $30 million is the kind of money that you need true wide receiver one production from. Having said that too, though, I think what works for him is Matthew Stafford loves him. The organization loves him. He was one of the biggest reasons why they won the Super Bowl, right? He's not an Antonio Brown type, right? CTESPN is what he's calling himself, right? He's not one of those guys. So I think that all works in his favor, but is that enough to say we'll pay a $30 million a year to not be a WR1?
I think you are talking about the thing that is the single hardest thing for a team and an organization and a coach and a general manager to make a call on. And that is, when is one of the most important players in your organization done, and when do you stop playing him stop paying him because you like him and because you think that what he's done in the past might have something to do with the future? This is the biggest challenge in sports. I'll go back to another team that you and I talk about a ton on this podcast, and when we just talk between the two of us, the Dodgers. The Dodgers for a super long time would always get rid of a guy a year too early than a year too late. And it's the right way to do it, right? Let someone else pay him. Think about you know what the opposite of that is? The Angels. They pay a year too late and a high premium, and it stinks to high heaven. So this is what you need to make your decision. Is it done? Is it over? Do we get out now? And it's so hard when it's a player like Cooper Kupp, because he's so popular. He's been such a good, not just a good player, but a good representative of the organization and doing everything the right way, the way that you want. But do you want $30 million tied up in a guy that's a good guy, that used to be a good player? That's the hardest thing with Les Snead and Sean McVay are going to have to land on, that decision between your feelings and the cold, hard reality of, is he impacting football games? And if the answer is no, fans will be, you know what? Fans will be angry. Fans are going to be, how could you let this guy go? The fact of the matter is, the second he's not good enough to play, you have to make a very hard decision. And we're not there yet, but another year like last year and the year before, all of a sudden could be we cannot continue to pay him a premium rate for non-premium performance.
Yeah, I think that's really what this is all about, is just saying, look, there's a lot riding on this season for Cooper Kupp. And I think that the key is if he can just stay healthy and contribute, that's going to be the biggest thing. But if he's missing significant time and then when he's in there, we're seeing numbers like you put up last year, then I think that you have to have a difficult conversation within the organization about his future. Look, we're in May, so I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to say that Cooper Kupp, his body, it looks like he's in great shape. He looks like he's healthy. He has missed time pretty much outside of the 2021 season every single year. So there's the truth about that. But still, I think that the talent's there. I think that the existence of Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua as a group kind of re-energizes him and reinvigorates him. And you got Matthew Stafford that's right where he needs to be. So I think all those can say, look, there is a path to him having a really good season, but hey, you brought up the Branch Rickey mentality of it's better to trade a guy too early than trade him too late. So I think the Rams might have that in mind too, but I think there's just so much, he has such deep roots within this organization to do anything drastic from that standpoint. He'd have to really fall off.
Well, you go to a Rams game and it's Cooper Kupp jerseys everywhere.
Yeah.
Like you don't just move on from a player of his caliber and his popularity without giving it some serious consideration. Here's something to think about. Matthew Stafford makes really good players look even better than they are, right? And so if it's not happening with Cooper Kupp anymore, I think that's an indicator right there, because when you look at some of the great wide receiver seasons in history, it's Calvin Johnson, who was his quarterback. It was Matthew Stafford. It was Cooper Kupp, who was his quarterback. It was Matthew Stafford. It was Puka Nacua, who was his quarterback. It's Matthew Stafford. And moving on to whoever may be next, Matthew Stafford's going to make that guy pretty darn good along the way. It's a tough business. It's a cold, hard, relentless, unforgiving monster that the second you can't do it anymore, they're going to start looking for someone else. I'm not saying you can't do it, but having a quarterback like number 9 on your roster can make those decisions slightly easier along the way, because you know whoever you do put in that spot is going to thrive.
That's a really good point. If you can't thrive with Matthew Stafford as your QB1, you're probably not going to do it anyway. It's like if you're a rapper and you can't have a hit scene with Dr. Dre as your producer, you probably should just get out of the rap game, right? So totally agree with that. But coming up next, the Rams are the most unathletic team in the NFL. That's coming up next here on Locked On Rams.
I don't know if FanDuel has odds on D-Mac dropping a Dr. Dre line there, but if they did, it should be there, because right now it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel, they're giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your very, very own, because right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. You heard me right. No, you don't have to clean your ears. That's $150 to bet on spreads, to bet on money lines, to bet on player props, and more. You can go in there and find your Rams futures. You can go in there and find everything you want on the impending NBA Finals, on Major League Baseball, the NHL, FanDuel Golf. I love playing the golf on FanDuel. It's absolutely amazing. You can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot, make every playoff goal, make every putt, make everything count even more. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Don't forget that promo code Locked On for $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Travis, here in our third segment, the creator of the relative athletic score, and I want to give him credit for his name. It is Kent Lee Platt. He ranked all of the NFL teams in terms of their athleticism, and the Los Angeles Rams, they came in 32nd. They finished with a 6.66 overall cumulative relative athletic score. And my big takeaway of this is, you said this before the show, actually, is this feels like this is so Los Angeles Rams, right? A player... a team and a personnel that doesn't focus solely on just athleticism and 40 times the underwear Olympics. They want football players. The guys have football speed. So this really does not surprise me one bit.
If there were 35 teams, they would have finished 35th. That's just how they roll, right? And quite frankly, I don't care. Here are the
behind Ohio State.
Yeah. I need to know what the wins look like. I need to know what the final scores look like. Those are the stats that I'm most interested in. along the way. Look, would it be great to have a Tyreek Hill, a guy that can just absolutely burn? Absolutely, it would be. They're fun to watch. Aaron Donald was an athletic freak, a guy that wasn't, 6'7" or anything like that, just fast and strong and powerful and explosive. It makes it a ton of fun. The Rams have made their money. Their bread and butter is finding Puka Nacuas and Cooper Kupps and Kyren Williams. That's what they do. These are guys, Byron Young and Kobe Turner. These are third-round picks. Those guys that we're talking about that jump off the screen at you at the combine are first-rounders. Rams haven't had a first-rounder in a really long time. That's where those guys get picked. The Rams haven't had a chance to pick one of those guys until this year, where they took Jared Verse. So I'm not the least bit surprised. It doesn't really concern. The one spot that it does concern you a little bit, two spots, I guess, wide receivers that we spent a lot of time talking about on this show today. So I'll kind of move past that one. And corners, right? Can you run with those guys? Because those guys that are super freaky athletic, can you keep up? Can you hang? And if you can't, there's going to get a lot of guys behind you, a lot of balls over your head. So those are the parts where I think it matters a little bit more. But that the Rams may not win the athletic award of the century is not a huge surprise to me.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, I always see Rams fans freak out like, oh, why are the corners 8 to 10 yards of the line? That's because they're running 4.7s. You're running 4.840s. That's why. I mean, they had the personnel to play up the line. They would. Trust me, they would. But, a couple things stand out to me with this ranking, too, is one, Aaron Donald's gone, so I know that's going to impact because he's extremely athletic. But two, just look in recent history. You look at Jared Verse, you look at Braden Fisk. They were really great highly on these athletic scores, especially the RAS. And also, same goes with Byron Young. He had a 9.22 RAS in the 2023 draft. So I do think that it is trending in the more athletic direction than what we've seen. But as he pointed out in his tweet, he said, look, the Rams, they haven't had a roster that averaged a 7 RAS score since 2008. So he said that they blaze their own path when it comes to the draft. So yeah, I think there's those two things. But yeah, I mean, look, this team, they know what they're doing from a roster construction standpoint, but it does feel like athleticism is a little more of a focus moving forward as far as the guys they drafted towards the top of their draft this time around.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a transitional period, right? They have first round picks. This is something they haven't had for a long time. They took Jared Verse. We'll see what happens next. That they'll have more first round picks going forward. They will get more athletic. That whatever the next version of the quarterback position is post Matthew Stafford, and that's probably not for quite some time. You look at what's happening in the league. More and more athletic people are playing that position, right? You have to be able to move your feet a little bit. Justin Herbert's 6'6", but he can move his feet when he needs to do it. That Matthew Stafford's one of the last remaining. I'm going to stand there and look down the field and take one in the chin every once in a while, but I'm going to deliver the ball on time. They're just it's a process, and the Rams are behind that process. They're not behind the winning process. They're not behind the postseason process. But when it comes to just stacking up guys that are really big and fast, that's really not their game.
No doubt about it. And look, they don't have a need for speed. They have a need for football guys, right? And that's the most important thing. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And you can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.